We are going to map out the chilling, highly classified secrets left behind by a 4-decade silent conflict between the United States and the USSR. For nearly half a century, humanity basically stood on the razor's edge of complete annihilation. But as we'll see, the most fascinating battles weren't actually fought where you might think.
Think about it for a second. What actually happens when the world's most powerful nations wage a war entirely in the shadows? Because instead of global nuclear firestorms turning cities to ash, this particular war was fought in smoke-filled safehouses, top-secret laboratories, and over deeply encrypted airwaves. And look, when you wage a secret war for that long, things are inevitably going to go wrong. It leaves behind this massive trail of vanished operatives, lost weapons of mass destruction, and locked government vaults that remain completely unsolved to this day.
Section 1. Secrets of the Deep, the Ocean Battlefield.
Let's start with the 1956 disappearance of the legendary British frogman Buster Crabbe. So he vanished while covertly swimming beneath a docked Soviet cruiser during a really high-stakes diplomatic visit. The official theory? They said it was just an equipment malfunction, oxygen toxicity, and drowning. But the alternative claims out there are just wild. Decades later, a Soviet veteran claimed the two of them actually had a silent underwater knife fight. Other people believe Crabbe was captured, brainwashed, and lived out his days training Soviet divers. And the crazy part? We literally won't know the truth until the British government finally unseals the files in 2057.
Now, you would think misplacing a 7,000-pound nuclear weapon would be, well, pretty much impossible, right? Wrong. The military actually has a specific code for this: broken arrows. In 1958, after a mid-air collision, a bomber had to drop a live nuke straight into the mud off Tybee Island, Georgia. Then in 65, an attack jet carrying a bomb simply rolled off an aircraft carrier elevator and sank 16,000 feet into the Pacific. And in 68, another one was lost beneath the ice in Greenland. We are talking about weapons hundreds of times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, just sitting at the bottom of our oceans today.
And speaking of things vanishing in the ocean, get this. In the year 1968 alone, 4 massive submarines from 4 different nations, the Israeli Dakar, the French Minerve, the Soviet K-129, and the American USS Scorpion, all disappeared into the abyss under highly suspicious circumstances. It is easily one of the darkest and most baffling chapters in naval history.
So how did the U.S. respond when they found the sunken Soviet K-129? Enter Project Azorian. The CIA literally teamed up with billionaire Howard Hughes. They used this elaborate cover story about deep ocean manganese mining to build a massive ship. But the real mission was straight out of a spy movie. A giant mechanical claw designed to reach 3 miles down and steal the Soviet sub, nukes and all. Officially, the declassified files say the claw suffered a structural failure and they only recovered a small section. But historians are still intensely debating whether that was just a convenient lie to keep the Soviets in the dark.
Section 2. Danger in the Skies, Aerial Paranoia.
If you want to understand the sheer paranoia of the era, look at the 1979 Vela incident. American satellites were up there watching for a very specific mathematical signature of a nuclear blast. It goes like this: a blinding flash of light, a brief dimming caused by a shock wave of ionized air, and then a second massive peak of light. It's a double flash, and absolutely nothing in nature produces it. Yet, a U.S. satellite detected exactly this over the remote Indian Ocean. Instead of confirming a rogue nuclear test, a White House panel blamed a tiny micrometeorite hitting the satellite lens. Yeah, weapons designers were absolutely outraged by that excuse, and the true cause remains heavily classified.
Or consider the 1961 death of UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld. His plane crashed in the Congo while he was actively trying to prevent a superpower proxy war. It was initially ruled as a simple pilot error, but the anomalies here are staggering. His body was found entirely untouched by the fire, with an ace of spades just tucked into his collar. Modern declassified records heavily point away from pilot error and toward a Western mercenary pilot who allegedly shot the plane down to protect corporate mining interests.
This aerial tension really hit a terrifying peak in 1983 when civilian flight KAL-007 drifted 300 miles off course into Soviet airspace and was shot down. 269 people were killed. The official aviation investigation blamed a catastrophic autopilot error. The Soviets, on the other hand, claimed it was a deliberate CIA spy probe sent to map their radar networks. But when the black boxes were finally declassified, they just revealed the pilots having completely casual, everyday conversations right up until the missile hit. It leaves you wondering how a state-of-the-art aircraft drifted so fatally far into enemy territory without anyone noticing.
Section 3. Frequencies and the Mind, Invisible Warfare.
If you're a sleeper agent halfway across the world, how do you actually get your orders? That brings us to the one-time pad. This is a brilliant cryptographic method using matching sheets of truly random numbers broadcast over shortwave radio. An undercover agent could tune in, decrypt their orders using their specific pad, and then immediately burn the paper. Because the key was totally random and used only once, these eerie broadcasts, which became known as number stations, were mathematically impossible for counterintelligence to crack. Literally unbreakable.
But perhaps the most unsettling enigma of the airwaves is a frequency known as UVB76, or affectionately, the buzzer. It has broadcast this monotonous, droning buzz 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for nearly 50 years. You can go online and tune into it right now. It's widely theorized to be a dead man's switch for the Soviet automated nuclear retaliation system, Perimeter. The terrifying logic here is that if a nuclear strike ever permanently takes the buzzer offline, the silence itself would automatically trigger a massive, global missile launch.
Back in the US, things were getting incredibly dark, with the CIA trying to master the human mind through Project MKUltra. Take the case of biological warfare expert Frank Olson. The official 1953 narrative was that he was secretly dosed with LSD by the CIA, had a psychological break, and tragically committed suicide by plunging through a closed 10th-floor hotel window in Manhattan. But when his body was exhumed in 1994, modern forensic pathologists found no glass lacerations on his face. What they did find was a massive blunt force hematoma on his forehead that happened before the fall. It strongly suggests he was silenced for knowing way too much about Cold War biological weapons.
Meanwhile, over in Moscow, American diplomats were facing a completely invisible threat dubbed the Moscow Signal. For decades, the KGB beamed concentrated microwave radiation straight into the U.S. Embassy. And the wildest part of this whole thing? The U.S. government kept it a secret from their own staff for over 20 years. Instead of stopping it, the CIA launched Project Pandora to quietly study the physiological effects. 3 consecutive U.S. ambassadors and numerous staff members ended up suffering from severe, bizarre illnesses and rare cancers. It really lays the groundwork for modern anomalies like Havana syndrome.
Section 4. The Frozen Enigma, the Ural Mountains.
We really can't talk about Cold War mysteries without hitting the 1959 Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 highly experienced hikers just vanished in the Russian wilderness. When the search teams finally found their camp, the tent had been slashed open, but from the inside, these seasoned survivalists had fled into a -30-degree night wearing only socks or completely barefoot. And when the bodies were finally located, the autopsies defied all logic. They had massive crushed chest cavities but zero external bruising, almost as if they were crushed by extreme pressure. One hiker was even inexplicably missing her tongue. It was a scene of just total illogical panic.
Naturally, official authorities at the time blamed hypothermia and a very vague elemental force. But the forensic test told a different story. The hikers' clothing tested for extreme levels of radiation. Add to that, witnesses 50 kilometers away reported seeing glowing orange orbs hovering and exploding in the night sky. When you put all that evidence together, it points far away from a simple avalanche and heavily suggests these hikers inadvertently wandered into a covert Soviet military weapons test, maybe a fuel air explosive or a toxic missile drop.
Which brings us to our final section, the legacy of secrecy.
Stepping back to look at all these threads, the pattern is identical. Whether it's the ambiguous closed-door ruling of an elemental force in the Ural Mountains, or British intelligence files marked classified until the year 2057, governments on both sides of the Iron Curtain willingly erased history. They took scientific anomalies, major blunders, and world-shattering truths and just buried them in steel vaults, all to protect the state and maintain that incredibly fragile balance of power.
The rusty number stations? They are still broadcasting their mechanical heartbeats into the night sky. Those lost multi-megaton hydrogen bombs? They are still resting quietly deep in the ocean mud. The physical and psychological remnants of the shadowy conflict are actually still all around us, which really leaves us to wonder, as long as those massive intelligence archives remain locked behind vault doors and those deep ocean trenches remain unexplored, is this secret war truly over?
Please like and subscribe.